which has been serving different categories of people in the field of research for more than 15 years in both Uganda and 15 other countries. Questions like why research is very important, what kind of research do you need in a time where we have technology playing a huge role, how is that integrated in the research now? All that is going to be answered by Mr. Martin Ogwa, who is the CEO Mood Technologies, as we have a conversation today. A very good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, we're talking about research. What is all about research, and why must an organization or an individual be interested in conducting a research?
Actually, Sharon, for so many years, as human beings, as mankind, we have been trying to understand our history. We have been trying our best to study our great-grandparents, what they were doing, what kind of food they were eating, how they used to protect themselves against all the harshness of the wilderness. So all this has been something that we have been doing for so many years in the field of to understand how we should move ahead in the future. So you find that historically we have been shaping our future. We shape our environment, we shape, we prepare the kind of services we need to have in order to protect the future generation. I can take you back about 2 million years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
2 million years ago. As mankind, we saw that there was need to expand our sources of food. Actually, we are looking at nutrition. So our great-great-great-grandparents were actually so much interested in seeing that we eat better. So we expanded, and we also explored into the areas of eating meat, because originally we were trying to eat only vegetables and fruits. So we have explored into eating meat. But in archaeological history, we found that the oldest spear, because we had to hunt for these animals, the oldest spear is about 500,000 years old. So you can see that for 1.5 million years, we have been trying to hunt animals, but without tools. So for about 75% of our lives, we have been feeding ourselves, expanding, and that helped us to grow our brain. Our brains have become bigger. We have more understanding. Nutritionally, we are much better. But if you try to go back and try to trace, we can understand this from studying. There's a community of tribe called San, there in South Africa, who are still trying to hunt animals without using tools. Yeah, so when we study them, we try to understand how basically our great-grandparents tried to hunt. So what they do normally, they select an animal, isolate it, and pursue it until this animal gets tired. And then later, they can now wrestle this animal and then kill it. So we can understand our history, but all along, we have been trying to shape how best we can do this, how best we can achieve, how best we can protect our homes, how best can we provide. Imagine going to the wild, leaving your wife and children at home with the lions, the crocodiles, and so on, the leopards. So you needed to actually find better ways to protect your family. Otherwise, we would get extinct. The wild animals would have finished us. So all this has been a kind of research we have been doing traditionally. We have been shaping the tools that helps us in bridging the timeline between what we need. So we needed food security, we needed food at home, we needed good sources of protein, we needed all this. So this is what research is all about. It's about finding better alternative ways of how we can use available resources to secure ourselves, to protect our environment. You can imagine we are growing in population, but the earth doesn't expand. We have close to 7.9 billion people now in the world, and we haven't increased the size of the earth. So that is something that we really need to purely watch very well. So we do a lot of investment of studying into how our previous people have lived, how we need to harness this to move forward. So that is basically what research is all about. Shaping our environments, looking at the available resources we have, and preparing for the future.
I understand organizations actually carrying out research because they need to improve their skills or services. What about individuals? What's really, why would an individual carry out research?
Look at one thing. We all come from families. If you want to secure your home, you need to find better ways of protecting your people. And that means you need to find what others have done which is good and has also contributed to the safety of their home. So individuals are very, 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 very key into handling the research.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what does it take for someone to plan and conduct research?
Yeah, planning research is a whole long process. Key thing is that you need to know what kind of impact you want to have in the community, in the target community that you're going to be looking towards improving. So if you're targeting a community, you need to also look at the kind of objectives you have. What do you want to improve? What is key for you? So that is very important in planning a research. Then you look at the resources you have. How much finance do you have to conduct this study? And then you factor in what kind of research do I have to need to do? What kind of data do I need to collect? What kind of questions do I need to ask in order to align to my objectives? So we look at that. And besides collecting data, you need to analyze this data. And that means you need a group of people who can understand how this analysis works, and then you interpret it into a meaningful something you can use. Mm-hmm. So planning a research involves you setting a clear objective, looking at the resources you have, both finance and human, because we are not going to conduct research without involving human beings. Sometimes we can, of course, use machines, but most of the time the research we are conducting, we work with humans. So you need to look at the human resource, look at the kind of questions you want to ask, the kind of study you want to do, and then also look at the kind of results and looking towards analysis.
In one of my course units at Macquarie, I think social administration, we actually did a bit of research as one of the topics, I think. But one thing that you would constantly hear was qualitative, quantitative, qualitative, quantitative, which is also a very big aspect of research. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, I think you bring a very clear, that's a challenge actually not only for students, but also people in the working environment. This is normally mixing up. We normally have quantitative, qualitative. So maybe it's good that you've asked. We can try to look at what's the difference between the two. I'll take a very simple example to go into that. If you live in Kampala, you know in the evening the jam is there. So if your target is to reduce the traffic jam on the road, you can choose one particular road. Maybe you can choose Kampala Road. So you could do two things. You could go along the road and interview the motorcycle riders. Sometimes we call them border borders. In English, of course. Now border border is an English word, right? So in English, that would be motorcycle taxis. So if you decide to go in the jam and find these people in the jam and then try to talk to them and understand, get their feeling, what they think about the jam. They'll talk to you about so many things, actually. They'll tell you about the people crossing the road. They'll talk about the taxis. They talk about the traffic lights. They talk about control of traffic. They'll talk about the people driving cars. They talk about all this. So this is an open-ended question. And that brings a lot of quality in the data. And that makes qualitative research. So that makes a qualitative kind of data. So you could go to the street and then take notes. You can record the audio. If you seek consent, you can record the video. And then you come back to your desk and start analyzing it. So this composes of, those compose qualitative research. While on the other side, quantitative is about things we can measure. It's about quantity. We can measure or we can categorize. If I ask how many women, we are talking about female. If you're talking about gender, we're talking about male and female. If you're talking about age, how old is somebody, we can look at that. So if you went to the same street and asked the same motorcycle riders that how old are you, your sex, and so on. And then now you could take another step and say, let me count actually the number of vehicles which are stuck on the road. So you can do two things. You could take an expensive option of flying a drone over the street and then counting the vehicles on the road. Or you can use street sensors. These are small wires laid on the road that the cars can step over, the motorcycles can step over, and at the end of the day, you know how many cars and motorcycles have crossed that road. So there are so many measures that can be taken to do this, though the pedestrians will not, they jump over the cable. So that wouldn't be a good measure to determine that. Another option is to use actually cameras. These are cameras that can help you do research, the position on a street, and then they can count how many cars. So you could count and then say, maybe 50% of the cars stuck on the road, of the vehicles stuck on the road are cars. Maybe it is only 5% of buses. And maybe also you're looking at their taxis, maybe like 15%. And you could have 30% of the traffic on the road to be motorcycles. And you can now weigh how best to handle your traffic, what to do. So such kind of information that you can count, you can know how many red cars are on the street, how many blue cars, and so on. How many yellow cars are on the street. So you can always determine this. So such kind of data goes into what we call quantitative. So don't worry about the
quantitative.
Yeah, quantitative.
It's to do with numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we have approximate 70% of Ugandans are youth and all that is all quantitative data.
Yeah, we are looking at quantity.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Now, which method is better? Qualitative or quantitative, or is there a place where you can actually have both methods being used, and when is that?
Yeah, so the method which is better is this is actually a key discussion in the research field, because as we said, quantitative helps you count, and there are direct questions. You ask somebody very direct questions. Then in the qualitative, they are open. So qualitative, you get more detailed
more information.
While quantitative, you get specific information that you actually want.
Yes.
So all these integrate to one another. Depends on the resources and the kind of research you want to conduct. If your research looks into, what we normally do as Mood Technologies is that we normally emphasize looking at the objective before we can advise which option to take. Because one, normally, because of budget and so on, one normally outweighs the other.
Okay. Which one usually outweighs because of the budget constraints?
Mostly quantitative things that measure which are direct are easier to administer. Yeah, so most of the people would go to that. And also we'll look at, it's also easy to analyze.
So quantitative yes, is actually harder to analyze?
It's easier to analyze.
Qualitative?
Qualitative is harder to analyze, yes, because it's we are talking like now. So somebody's going to analyze.
And a lot of information.
A lot of information is going on. So analysis is a bit of bit of complex. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And when do you, so you said so you say quantitative is easier because it's specific. Qualitative is a bit harder because there's a lot of analysis required. Because of budgets, there may be a constraint. But when do you use both?
Yeah,
or is it all the time?
Yeah, most of the time we have advised organizations to mix the two. Do a bit of this and more of the other, so that you can get richer information from the qualitative study, which is something like a focus group discussion, where you collect a group of people and you discuss a topic. You're looking at a place where you can go and talk to key opinion leaders. You don't need to close the question. You keep it open so that they can discuss, they can be more open. So those kind of, it's better, it's good to integrate it with quantitative research, where we're doing values which are measurable. Yeah.
Okay. What is a proper sample size if someone's to conduct a research?
Well, sample size is, we have a lot of statistical methods to determine a sample size. So what is proper, we normally use statistical formula to calculate. But what we recommend for a quantitative study, you should have a minimum of 30. We are talking about talking to individuals or doing experiments, because research is not only talking to people or looking at livestock and the farm. We are also talking at experiment. We have people in laboratories who are doing experiments. They need to analyze this data. They need to research. You're looking at virus. You're looking at a lot of other things. You're looking at plants as well. So the sample for a quantitative research minimum, we normally recommend 30. Though the number now increases based on the group you're looking at. If you're looking at doing 5,000, you're reaching a community of 5,000, then the size changes. While on the other side, qualitative, which involves interviewing, like talking to a group of people. We talk to focus group discussions, key informants. You can even do literatures. You can review literatures, things that people have written before, and to understand the area well. So this doesn't need too many. If your budget allows, you can do more, but basically, minimum of 10 is recommended. Is what we normally recommend. It can give some good meaning.
Is the sample size different from a focus group?
Yeah, the sample size is different.
What's the difference?
Yeah, the sample size is a number out of the many. If you're looking at reaching a village of 200 households, how many households should you pick to interview that will give you a representation of the rest of the remaining group? Because you might not go talking to everybody. Of course, if you have resources, you would do that. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, a portion of the group represent the others. That's why we also say that it shouldn't be too small. That doesn't represent. If you have a village of 200 households and you pick 2, and you interview them and you say you have already got information for the whole village, it might not represent well. So it is different from a focus group where you have gathered to get opinion.
I used to do some research as well before I graduated, but one of the problems that I remember we used to face, and yet we're advised that, you know, make sure you find a way to get the information because you're being paid to do this job in a specific time frame, was that when Ugandans, some people weren't receptive to giving out information. How do you guys, is that now a common factor still? Because then it was a common factor that you go to someone's household with the samples they've told you, the next house maybe after 3 houses. So every after 3 houses you're interviewing that household, and usually we struggled with the houses in the fences or houses that are cordoned off. So I'm just wondering if that's still, you know, maybe one of the factors.
Yeah, so it's normally how you start the whole research process, because we need to approach, most of the time we approach people in the community. We work with the local leaders. If you just walk into somebody's household, even me, I would refuse you entering my house, right? More so talking to me. But if a leader, my leader, brings you to me,
I'm comfortable.
You're more comfortable talking to me because at least your leader knows. So we normally work with local leaders to overcome such kind of problems. If you don't do that, of course you'll get into that. Even the people in the gates that you talked about, they have some people they respect in the community.
Yes.
They are local council in the community. So you can talk to them and go and knock the gate and they let you in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What is a proper, what makes data analysis important to organizations or individuals?
You said you walk into the community, though you talked about a gate. Let me take you to the village. Yeah, if you're interested in knowing the varieties, the kinds of coffee people are growing in the community, and you're looking at, let me first give an example of my 200 households, and let's say you worked out all your formula and came up to 55 households that you want to interview. And if you manage to print your questionnaire, I'm still saying you could be using a traditional method. You print your questionnaire. Each one could be 10 pages, let me say so, but sometimes the research go beyond that. So you print your 10 pages of question and give your young men and girls and boys to go and conduct a research. Assuming the 55 households, maybe 5 you don't find, or they reject, like you were saying, and then you end up with 50. Do you know that you'll end up with 500 pages of research on your desk? Somebody walks in and say, okay, so people in, let's say like Ajoadur village, maybe you might not pronounce that, but if you take, for that example, let's say you go to Ajoadur village and you interview the households. You look at the coffee farmers, you talk to them, they bring you this and then put it on your desk. You have 500 papers. And then they say, so what kind of coffee are these people growing? Is it Robusta? Is it Arabica? Then you start flipping through. How long would it take? You might even go for a break. So one of the things is that we have a lot of systems that can help us put data and put meaning to data. So data on paper like that wouldn't have meaning unless you scan through it. You could do that if you have a fairly large research, you would be looking at 5,000 pages of work to look through and then get your results. So this is something that we normally put it in a simple way. We need to analyze this data to get meaning out of it. And it should be a simpler way to do that. So we do a lot of statistical analysis. We get the data, find the key objective that you had set at the beginning. We now extract it from the report, from the data.
Are you achieving those? You start to tick off and see if you're achieving those.
Yes, then you can look at now, is this what we expected? How do we, because the essence of doing the research is for you to improve a community. Then you look at where do we start from, based on the data you've collected. Yeah.
Who are, because your company has been in existence for over 15 years, who are the people that usually come to you for research?
We're looking at a number of organizations come to us, and also individuals. You talked about studying and doing research. Also students come to us because they need to be supported in research. So we support, majority we support is organizations and government institutions. And also at the same time we said, okay, why not we support students? We were students one time. So yeah, that is key to us. You
also highlighted, you said something in passive, traditional methods of research.
Oh, traditional methods. I talked about the 2 million years we took to, while eating meat, animal meat, that is animal protein. And out of that, 75% of the time we are running after animals to get them. But during that time, our great-grandfathers and grandmothers were shaping up a process to do this. Okay? So it's always necessary that we purely look at the timeline, make this go much faster. So our essence is to speed up all this process because the world has grown.
Yes.
Yeah, and we have a lot of technologies now to conduct the research. Yeah.
So what are the traditional methods? Like you talked about questionnaires and what's that?
Yeah, so traditionally, actually we didn't even use papers because our great-grandies did not have papers to write on. They would assemble, share ideas, talk about their stories, they find how to shape this. Then we migrated, of course, into using papers. So you would print your questionnaire work and then talk to someone and record their answer. Those were traditional ways. Then you come and start flipping through the pages, like I was saying, to find meaning out of it. So that is already outdated. It's a very traditional way now. We have technologies.
So what's happening now?
Well, in the world, about 83% of the people already have smartphones. So it is something that we harness. Look at us spending about money on let's say 5,000 papers to do a small research. We're affecting our environment as well. The trees, these papers come from cutting trees most of the time. So we are also at the same time not being so nice to our environment. At the same time, we are also being so slow, because by the time you flip through 500, 3,000 pages of work, that's the time we are being a lot more unproductive. So we can do this. We can harness this into the better technology. So those are very traditional ways. Use of papers, or from use of nothing. Some of the history we would write on clay. If somebody wrote something on a clay, I don't know how long you would take to to write on a clay.
And that is very precious. Yet that history is still precious, and it shows us where we've come from.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because that is where we came from. We wrote there, but the time it takes to write a result of a research on a stone, if you're not strong, you wouldn't.
Okay. Well, we're still talking about the role of technology in information and research, and we're still talking to the CEO, Mr. Martin Ogwal of Mood Technologies. Has been in existence for over 15 years, conducting research for many companies, organizations in Uganda and out of Uganda. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll be back with more on the role of technology in information and research.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
Simply make a small deposit of 99k and pay the balance mpola. You can pay in daily, weekly or even monthly installments while you enjoy your new phone. So what are you doing today? Visit any MTN shop near you and get the MTN cupboard. That's super easy.
Welcome to Friends Stadium. Everybody's ready. Wait a second, not everybody. Come on, dude. It's the FIFA World Cup. You're going to lose your seat, the ritual seat, the lucky one. Losing more than a seat, your team is going to lose. Where are you, dude? The match is about to start. Your friends won't hold out much longer. Excuse me. Finally, everything is in the right place. Hey, other hand. And you, do you have everything you need to believe?
The Ministry of Health informs the public that there are confirmed cases of Ebola in Uganda. We, however, urge the public not to panic as the situation is being managed. The Ministry of Health further reminds the public to be on the lookout for any persons who may show signs and symptoms of Ebola. These include high body temperature, abdominal pains, diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from the body openings such as the nose, eyes, and mouth. Please inform the nearest health worker immediately if you see anyone with these signs and symptoms. To prevent Ebola from spreading further, please take the following preventive measures: regular washing of hands with water and soap, avoid handshaking and hugging, avoiding any contact with any suspected Ebola patients. Any person who dies suddenly should not be buried but reported to the nearest health worker or LC1 immediately. For further information, please call the Ministry of Health toll-free number on 0800 100-066 or send a free SMS to your report on 8500. This message is from the Ministry of Health with support from UNICEF and World Health Organization.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back to Good Morning Uganda Extra with Ms. Sharon Chamjusha and Mr. Martin Ogwal, CEO of Mode Technology. Still talking about the role of technology in information and research. Now, Mr. Ogwal, what kind of software tools are best if someone wants to analyze data and affordable to a regular Ugandan?
Yeah, so we had talked about the two categories of kind of research we can conduct.
Okay.
And we can do both in a digital way. So if you're analyzing quantitative data that involves numbers and categories, there are simple software that exist, like Microsoft Excel is something common that people is affordable to a regular Ugandan. On most computers you have Microsoft Excel, so it can be used to analyze data. Meanwhile, you can do a more complicated analysis using some of the software like Stata, SPSS, GenStat, R. There are many kind of software that can be used to analyze these are quantitative data. But if you look on the other side of qualitative data, we talked about you taking notes, recording voice that is on audio, and so on. So that takes a moment for you to plug it in a software, right? So such software are a little more expensive, and what they do, they normally do transcription. That means listening to the voice and typing it into text, and then start scanning it to make meaning out of it. So such kind of software like NVivo is normally available, but a little more expensive, and Atlas TI and the others. And the affordability part, if we are looking at who is going to use this at the end of the day, most of the software companies grade them into 3 categories. There's a student version, that takes, they give it, most of them are 3 months. So in 3 months it stops working for you, because imagine you have already finished your research anyway. So those ones are a bit cheaper. And then you go for 6 months for those students who want to do a bit of a longer research. And then for companies and organizations, it's normally either it's called perpetual, it's open, you buy it and you keep it, or you can buy it for a yearly period. So those ones are a little more expensive. So affordability depends on who is buying the software and what you want to analyze. So then if you go, that is for qualitative. So for quantitative, we had the Excel and so on. Some of the companies, because of the availability of Excel on many computers, have decided to develop tools that can enhance the capabilities of Excel so that it can do deeper analysis. Something like Excel Stat is a software that is an add-on to Excel. So people can use them. Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the problems that people face while conducting research, and how has Mood Technologies helped such people?
You already talked about one thing of people denying you entering their house.
Yeah.
So key thing in doing research is organizing it well, and because it's a very good coordination. So if it is not well coordinated, you actually end up into problems. Then another thing, we talked about sample size. If you select it wrongly, you'll get data which is not representative of the community or the population you want to target.
How would the organization know that my data that I received doesn't represent the views of the community, if that's what the research was about?
From the beginning, we sit and review the objectives and the target population. And then we use statistical methods to compute how many people you should interview.
Have you had a scenario where you've carried out data and you've had a mishap in that way? That you sort of carried out, something happened and something was wrong and you had to go back and redo it?
Yeah, sometimes you don't plan for some events. Supposing you plan a research and epidemic happens. Or you had done it midway and this happens. So we have to stop the research and then go back and redo it. If it is supposed to be a certain period of time, then we could try to redo that. Okay. Sometimes if you don't plan well and you run out of resources, it's also one of the things.
Yes.
Yeah, if you underestimate your resource and then you don't plan well, you can run out of this. So such can call for redoing the research. Then if you don't train the people who are going to collect the data well, of course they're going to bring for you what you've given them. So it is not a good training, and they're going to also bring for you bad data. So that means after analyzing you get the data is not carrying any much meaning. So you have to redo this research. Okay. Yeah.
Those are some of the problems.
Those are some of the problems. So we normally advise that good planning is very good in the research. You need to address you need to look at your resources, you need to plan well, and you need to train the people who are going to, because most of the time the project leaders are not the ones going to interview the people.
Yes.
You recruit the young men and women to go and talk to the people in the community. That is if you are doing a research that involves going to the community. For experimental data, you're talking about working in a laboratory. So you need to train these people well. If you don't train them well, you'll get wrong data. And then also the issues of sampling, you get errors in sampling and so on. So that is actually, some people go and collect data, I can tell you this. Then they come to us at the stage of analysis. And then we say, okay, we have a problem here.
Okay. How is Mood Technologies helping people in research?
That is actually now very important, because we have talked a lot about the research. And number one, we look at cutting the timeline in the research. A typical research, people plan it for, let's say, close to even 6 months of planning, and they want to collect data in 1 week. So you can see that we can take a longer time to plan, and then we have a big pressure to get the data. And then after that, now there's analysis. Then they can take another 3 months or 6 months to analyze. So you can see that there's a disparity between planning and executing this. So sometimes, of course, it's because of logistical challenges. But where we have come in now is that we want to digitalize all the research. When we start from this from square one, we have to use the technologies. We talked about mobile phones. So we turn your work into a digital form. Some of the software like CS Pro, ODK, Survey CTO, we use this, and this software which we can install on most of the smartphones, they're able to take it up. So the first thing we do is to turn the research into a digital form. The second thing that we are handling is data analysis, and we handle it in two ways. We have already computerized, we have done a lot of work in computerizing data analysis. As we said, the software is sometimes not affordable to some of the groups of people. So how do we make research more affordable? So if you go to our website, you'd find that we have some of the data which is already analyzed on the website. And these ones we do them instant. We have servers, we have systems that processes this data. Once someone collects data with their mobile phone and upload, you don't need to wait for the end of the study. You don't need to wait for the end of the research. This is an instant. The server analyzes it and gives you results. That is one way that we approach it. Then the second way is, after this has come out, then we can now do extensive other analysis. So for the dashboard, for the website, we do certain kinds of analysis. We agree with the project leaders on key areas to analyze, and we put our system to automatically process it. So if you're a student, you don't need to go looking for an expensive software. If you're an organization with a limited project, you don't need to go looking for very expensive software besides the constraint on your project. So we digitalize that. Then the third thing that we normally do is we do monitoring and evaluation systems. You can imagine that a project is going to take 5 years. Most projects take 5 years. We don't need to do for a tool that will be used for 1 week. We have to look at the long term. We have to look at the structure of your objectives. We need to look at the kind of impact you want to have in the community. We need to look at how do you measure the impact. So all this we factor in a system and then roll it out, and then you can now take on your project.
Okay. And what kind of solutions do you offer to your clients?
Yeah, so the solutions are also linked to the services that we're offering. So number one, digitalizing everything in the research. And then number two, providing a very low-cost data analysis solution. And for the long-term projects, we are keying in the monitoring and evaluation system, which is very comprehensive, and it helps you see where your project is heading.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long would it take someone to receive or get their feedback or results once they decide to come and work with more technologies?
Yeah, the results also there are in two ways. Whenever you start your research, all you need is for the person in the field, the young man or woman in the field who is collecting data, to find access to internet and upload your data. So the moment the data reaches our servers, it's automatically broken down into statistical outputs, which you can export to Microsoft Word. You don't need to struggle learning skills of data analysis. So this is already broken into Microsoft Word. You can just export it instant. These are technologies we have harnessed. And also the second thing is that your data, we break it down into other statistical formats. Let's say you want to use, you want to have another look into your data, maybe besides what we had agreed on. Then this data is converted into statistical formats, like you can use it. We talked of SPSS, Stata, R, we have talked of GenStat. So all these formats, you just need to go to our servers, to our website, log in there, and download it, the format that you're comfortable with, and run it on your software. So these are all methods which are fairly instant. And also we provide GPS mapping, because when your data is being collected, let's say you go to Akohoro, and then you go to a certain village and you want to know how the households are distributed for the research you're doing. All this is tagged into the data which is being collected. So you can go and see a real map showing you how the households are, how the distribution is, and these are all things we fully computerize. So this process runs so smoothly. Yeah. So we want to ensure that there's speed in research, there's speed in delivery, and we speed the process. I can tell you about 8,000 BC, we started I can say we, because those are our great grandparents. We started great investment in agriculture, and by then there were only 5 million people in the world. I think Kampala is about 3.6 million. Yeah, so a greater Kampala plus Mukono or Entebbe would actually, the population would make the whole world population at that time. So you can see that at that time our great-grandfather started already investing in technologies, a lot of research with that small population. Now we are 7.9 billion people in the world. So we need to move faster. We need to secure the future for our children, we need to secure the future for our family, we need to protect our environment. So we need speed in the research so that we can improve our environment. And we are so much investing in that to see that we see that the humanity is well taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you help people in monitoring and evaluation projects?
So going back to monitoring and evaluation, the monitoring and evaluation is something that sees the whole project. That means from the planning stage. Most of the time when the project is being started, there's a document which is prepared, which is called a logical framework. That is a log frame, in short. It's when you're studying the research also. Then they just refer to it as a log frame. So log frame is very key in a project to continue. So in the planning of this whole process of monitoring and evaluation, we sit and see what kind of impact do you want to have in the community, and we also put it in a log frame. So I take a case for our great-grandparents. By the way, our great-grandmothers were very good people in medicine. They knew what medicine to give you if you have a stomach problem. They knew what kind of root to harvest to give you. Our fathers were also doing very great in making sure there's food in the family and so on. And it's something we still do up to now. Women have, all these tasks have been integrated now. So if you're looking at, let's say, having food in your house, which can take you for 6 months, at least in your store, and at the start you have 0. So the key impact is to have food in your house. So how do you plan this? How do you run it as a family? So you could plan and say, let me take a period of 5 years, of course, and say, because that is a time most projects take. I'm giving an example of a household food, because there's a lot of food security. That is something that we are doing now. We do a lot now. And it started way back with our great-grandparents. So if you're looking at that, so you have to look at what kind of impact you want to have in the community. How do you measure impact? Is it the number of bags of beans you have now in your store? So then you can weigh that. So what are your milestones? So we use the word milestone. Milestone is a very old word because traditionally we would put stones along the road to show you how many kilometers is remaining to reach a place. I take an example. If you're going from Kampala to Gulu, you'd find somewhere they say the National Roads Authority have put now concrete, but traditionally they used to be stones. Is it Gulu, GLU, 200 and what kilometers? When you progress, you find another one. When you go ahead, so these are things that we also set in projects. We said that year 1, what will we have achieved? Year 2, if our target is 5 years, what will we have achieved? So this we sit with organizations and go through with them, and then we see how they break this. Then we design a system that can help implement this, to monitor. Year 1, what have you achieved? You said you wanted 2 bags of beans in your store every month. Have you got it now? What are you doing to do that? So there are things that we call also indicators. How do you measure that I'm progressing? Then you put assumptions. You assume possibly earthquake will not happen and wipe away your home. Or epidemic happens, or there is a disease for the crops you're targeting which wipes all the varieties of the crops. So we put key assumptions into the kind of monitoring and evaluation system. Doesn't mean it is so perfect, because we know there are changes. Weather will change, maybe rain will not come this time. So that is why we have assumptions. So we do this and keep fine-tuning. So if a project doesn't do that, it's also like a pilot flying a plane without knowing where they're going. So you cannot roll on the runway and lift up when you have not plugged in your destination. So that is dangerous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a training school for research, for people to learn how to do research?
So many people have been asking us about training schools, training. In short, we are not a training school. We are not a training institution. Though we provide customized training to organizations and to individuals on special request. So we don't do a training school as such. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't have. Yeah.
What are you currently working on in communities, or in our community specifically?
You see, now in the research, we, as Mu Technologies, we come to bridge in between a team of researchers and our local people. So we want to speed up the interventions which are going to the local community. Whether it is a research in a laboratory, we need to give them a better method of having this work faster. If a crop is affected by a certain kind of disease, we need to see how fast we can help our people in the laboratory to research on that, and then we eradicate this. So one of the things we do is to make sure that we harness the capabilities of the different tools we use. One of the things I talked about is to have data analyzed almost instant so that you can get result. We don't need to take 3 months, you don't need to take 6 months to get result when the community is being affected. I like the speed at which we tackled COVID-19. You can see that normally medicine takes a long time, vaccines take a long time to come out. So that one is something which a lot of research investment has been done in. And from our side, we are currently working on improving to broaden key areas. We talked about agreeing on some research areas to be computerized and then automated for you to go and download. Some of them, like statistical models, we don't normally do that. We normally do it outside after the work is done. And then also looking at dietary diversity, things concerning malnutrition and so on, which needs a bit of complexity in measuring. We are working on putting this, also computerizing it, so that researchers don't spend a lot of time to go and analyze this. We need to have this work faster.
Which people do you usually target as your key clients?
Yeah, the research is a broad area. We have done so much intensive work in agriculture and health, and we have helped a lot of students to also build up their research. So our community is, we are looking at areas of agriculture, areas of health, and of course we have not so much gone into security, but we have been so much targeting those key areas and helping students.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the conversation. I think I now know more about research and the right people to come to. 15 years in existence really speaks a lot about your work then. Well, that was an interview with Mr. Martin Ogwal, CEO of Mood Technologies, telling us more about research and also how there's been a shift because of technology, that, you know, the role of technology now in information literacy and research, and how things have improved, how fast the companies also need to, organizations need to adopt this change, and how this research is actually contributing to the welfare of so many people in the world. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Sharon Chomdisha. A very good morning.
Live